Sometimes a novel doesn't turn out the way we hope. The characters don't leap off the page, the plot is kind of meh, the setting perhaps needs some settings tweaked. Something is fundamentally wrong with your manuscript. Something is broken within it. It's just not working. But fear not, for I have 5 things that you can try to help repair a broken novel. Speaking of broken things, I think the subscribe button isn't working, so if some of you could maybe try clicking on that to see if it's working again, that would be great. All right, the first thing you can do to help fix a broken novel is to wait. Imagine if you could have a more skilled writer come back and evaluate your manuscript. Someone with more experience than you, someone who's better at writing. Well, you can, and that more skilled writer is you, or at least it eventually will be. If you're having major problems with a manuscript, one of the best things you can do is simply wait. Put the project aside and come back to it in a few weeks or a few months or even a year or two. In your time away, you should still be writing and learning. Maybe start work on another project, ideally something that's not like the project that you set aside, but keep writing, keep learning, keep improving your skills. A couple of things will happen during this break from your novel. First off, you'll get better as a writer, provided you're still practicing, which means that when you come back to the project, you'll have a better set of skills and will be able to bring that to bear against your novel. A second thing that happens is a change in perspective. Giving your mind some time to process a project without actually working on that project is an excellent way to generate new ideas. Whether you realize it or not, your mind is still going to be thinking about and working on that project, even though you aren't actively working on it day to day. So when you come back to your manuscript, problems you hadn't seen before are going to leap out at you. But you will also be able to come up with solutions to those problems as well because your mind has had more time to process the work. Next up, the second thing you can do to fix a bad novel is get a second opinion. At the end of the day, your novel is meant for other people. Of course, in the mornings, it's just for you, but after 11 a.m., other people need it too. Being too close to your project, having too much invested in it, can often make us blind to the problems contained within it. Sometimes it takes an outside voice to get things straightened out. The pesky little ego sneaks in there and hides the problems from us. Deep down, we know what's wrong with the manuscript, but we just can't admit it to ourselves. Some of this can be mitigated by some time away from the project, as I mentioned in point 1, but you often need someone other than you to read the novel and point out the problems. This is where critique partners come in. Good critique partners are like good scotch. You need to seal them inside an oak barrel for a couple of decades before they're any good. Someone who will give you an objective, constructive, action-oriented evaluation of your novel, both from a technical perspective and from a reader's perspective, is invaluable. Even if you aren't having problems with your novel, even if you're fairly happy with it, you should still get it critiqued by somebody else. Getting a thorough critique on your work from at least one other person, but ideally more than one other person who isn't you, is invaluable for fleshing out an idea and improving it. Next up, the third thing that you can do to fix a bad novel is cut out everything that's not working. Fixing a novel is a lot like surgery. You just need to get in there with a sharp knife and cut out anything that looks like it doesn't belong. Sure, they teach different techniques at legitimate medical schools, but I've always found success with the hack and slash approach. Well, I've always found success. My patients less so. Go through the novel and take out anything that doesn't work. Look at it scene by scene, find all the parts you don't like, and get them out of there. This exercise is not so much about what you cut out, but rather about evaluating what works and what doesn't. Sometimes when a novel doesn't work, we just have this vague sense that there's some overall problem with it, and actually going through and evaluating it scene by scene is a good way to pin down what specifically isn't working and what is working. It might just be how you're getting into the conflict that's causing problems. It might be one specific subplot or one specific character that's ruining the whole thing. The rest of the novel might actually be quite good, and there's just one or two bad apples that are ruining the whole thing. In order to fix what's limiting your story, you have to figure out what's limiting your story. Find the weak points and eliminate them. Understand what the actual problems are with the novel rather than just thinking that the whole thing is bad. Next up, thing number 4 you can do to repair a bad novel is use a plot structure. I'm generally not a huge fan of plot structures. Things like the hero's journey or Freytag's pyramid, the 3-act structure, 7-point story structure, 12-point story structure, 32-point story structure. I just personally don't find them that useful when you're creating a story, and I find that most stories can be mapped onto most plot structures without a lot of difficulty, so I don't really see what the point of them is in a lot of cases. But all that being said, I do think plot structures have their uses. One thing I like about plot structures is they define what needs to happen in a story at specific points in that story, and the good plot structures at least give reasons to back up why these things are so important. If you take a plot structure and try to fit it to your story and find that you're going against something the plot structure tells you to do, or you don't have something happening at a specific point in the story that the plot structure advises you to have happening at that point, then that could highlight the problem in your story. So one example of this, if you take something like 3-act structure, which is probably one of the simplest and most commonly used plot structures, one of the things that 3-act structure advises is that the inciting incident or the conflict should be established by the end of Act 1, which I think most people who talk about 3-act structure advise is like 20% of the way through your story. So if your inciting incident doesn't happen until 50% of the way through your story, or it happens at 2% of the way through your story, then moving that inciting incident might be enough to fix the novel. It might not be, there could still be other problems with the story, but at least taking the plot structure and evaluating it against your story may highlight the problem. This does not mean that you should just blindly follow what a plot structure tells you to do, but if you're going against a plot structure and you find it isn't working, shifting your story to better follow that plot structure may be what needs to be done in order to improve the story. And lastly, the 5th thing that you can do to repair a broken novel is go back to your original idea. Writing a novel is such a long process that it's easy for the destination to change along the way. The initial idea, the thing that got you excited about the novel in the first place, might be completely gone or forgotten by the time you've written the whole thing. When this happens, you might end up blindly going towards something that doesn't even interest you, or something that isn't as good as your initial idea. Try to think back to your original idea, what initially attracted you to this novel in the first place. If you really wanted to explore a specific character but find that in the novel they're taking more of a secondary role, then that could be the problem. If you came up with an interesting piece of technology or a magical ability, but once you've written the novel you find that it doesn't actually get used in the plot very much, then that could be the problem. Now, sometimes you start writing and you go in a different direction and it works out great. Some people write a novel without knowing what direction they want to go in. But it's also possible that you haven't realized the vision you initially set out on and you've gotten off track from it. And a novel that doesn't follow your vision might need some help. Unlike this video, which is over, which means I don't need help to finish it, I guess. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you're trying to get your first novel written, I have a comprehensive novel writing program that you can check out at the link in the video description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.